Political panel, we have with us political writer for The Atlantic, Molly Ball, contributing editor for The Atlantic, Michelle Cottle, and senior writer for The Federalist, Mary Catherine Ham. Let's just go down the line. This was shockingly similar to the same reports going on, except angry conservatives and Democratic lawmakers in 2009 and 2010. Is it the same thing, do you think?
Well, as far as the Democrats go, this is what goes around comes around. They don't have any power base in Washington. They feel like they have to take it to the grassroots to get their message heard, and they're really kind of stoking up the anger out there across the country. So they thoroughly intend to focus on this and make it as painful as possible for Republicans to repeal any part of this.
And Molly, of course, the Tea Party protests in 2009, 2010 did foreshadow electoral victories for conservatives and Republicans in the House and then later the Senate. But Obamacare still passed.
Well, that's a very good point. And the reaction to Obamacare, I think, was a large part of why they reaped the electoral whirlwind. And so that you have Republicans really not sure how this is going to play out, sort of paralyzed. Do we do something? Do we not do something? They want to see if this has staying power. They want to see if it's real. Most Republicans I talk to still think this is being ginned up. It's, George Soros money. It's Democratic operatives. It's Planned Parenthood. This isn't real grassroots. And, I remember Republicans 8 years ago, or Democrats saying, oh, this is all Koch brothers money, this isn't a real phenomenon. And so only time will tell. I think you can't fake that kind of passion that we're seeing, but only time will tell if those activists are engaged in the long run and if they're organizing the way the Tea Party did. Because remember, the Tea Party had local chapters, they had people who stayed involved. It was a long-term phenomenon.
And what do you think? I'm hearing hearing similar skepticism from conservatives and Republicans that this is all George Soros and whatever, but I don't know, it looks exactly the same as what we saw by conservatives 7 years ago.
Right. Democratic lawmakers at the time called them astroturf or extremist mobs, un-American, brown shirts were some. I would argue that Republicans not use that kind of terminology. It's not good for debate. But take the questions. This doesn't seem like Chaffetz's was a particularly productive meeting. So I would suggest maybe less yelling, and you could actually hear his answers. But here's the question, I think, and whether it's a Tea Party, is where do those electoral victories come? Where are the constituents more liberal than their conservative representation? We know there are stories on the other side of the Obamacare issue as well. We saw them in the town hall here on CNN. And then there's also the issue of, I remember how an atmosphere of constant protest turned Wisconsin blue forever.
Right.
Oh, wait, no,
not so much.
It did not. So this actually can be counterproductive if it is, at this height for a sustained period of time.
So I want to show this footage of the new Education Secretary, Betsy DeVos. She was trying to visit a D.C. public school earlier today, but she was blocked by protesters. Here she is.
Find your way to the position. You should be so proud of yourself.
And later in the day, her predecessor, Obama's Education Secretary, Arne Duncan, actually said people should bring Secretary DeVos into public schools. She should know as much as she can about them, kind of a backhanded compliment or backhanded protest, because he was suggesting she doesn't know much about them. But this is going to be a problem for her, I think, potentially.
She is going to face a lot of controversy and protest. I do agree that it's not that productive to bar her from public schools. I mean, later she went in anyway. I think more productive is, the Washington teachers unions were out there and they were not barring her from coming in. They were just trying to talk to her and try to get their message across to her as to what they do and what they're hoping to see from her, and get the message across that they want everybody to succeed. But when you have something like this where they're physically blocking her from going in, that just leads to backlash and it doesn't actually accomplish anything. But she is going to have this problem.
And Mary Catherine, one of the issues, of course, is that she is to this day, the only Trump nominee who has gotten any votes against her by any Republicans.
Right. And so I think, look, Democrats ran into a problem of their own making with not having the filibuster, but there is all this emotion that sort of needs to work its way through. They unfortunately keep running into a buzzsaw of demoralization, and every nomination keeps going through. So I think there's a need to have an outlet for this kind of thing. Angry white dude yelling at a powerful lady for doing her job and physically blocking her, maybe not the right message that you're trying to send, and there are more productive ways to do that.
But the Betsy DeVos phenomenon is a really good example of this groundswell catching even Democrats by surprise. Again, I talk to a lot of Republicans who say, oh, this is just the teachers union. They're using their money to protest. this caught even Democratic leaders by surprise that this was the nomination that most inflamed their grassroots. This was the one that jammed the Senate switchboards. This is the one where a cabinet secretary is getting followed around by protesters. And this is the kind of thing, if this is really ordinary middle-class moms, again, reminds me of the Tea Party people who were never engaged in politics before, but something about this has inflamed people. That's where potentially the danger, I think.
Very interesting, and also suggesting that the grassroots, as with conservatives, now with progressives, way more in touch than their supposed leaders in Washington, D.C. Molly, Michelle, and Mary Catherine, thank you so much, as always.